Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for listening to Mr. Laxton's video on this Algebra II Chapter 6 practice test here. All right, so let's just dive into this to see what we got. The first question starts off with a bang here. The long division is kind of a tough one here. It's long as it's in the name. So let's see what we got. We have x minus 1, and I have to divide that into that x cubed minus 3x squared minus x minus 8. All right, so let's see what we end up getting here. All right, and we talked about this in class is that you want to try to make whatever you see right here. So if I want to try to make x cubed, I have to put an x squared up here because x squared times x gives me x cubed. X squared times -1 gives me -1 x squareds. Okay, and remember here's the tricky part where students tend to get a little caught up is you subtract straight down. So remember we talked about we like to add the opposite of both of these guys. So now this is a negative x cubed, so those guys cancel out when we add straight down. Now -3x squareds plus a positive 1x squared is going to be -2x squareds. And then I bring down this -x. He wants to come play in the game. So now, excuse me, I did not mean to draw that line there. We want to try to make this -2x squared. So if I want to try to make that, I need to put a -2x up here. Because if I multiply -2x by x, I get -2x squared. Now if I multiply -2x by -1, I get positive 2x. If I subtract here straight down, I add the opposite of both these guys. These guys cancel out, and then I'm left with -1x minus 2x's is going to be -3x's. Bring down the -8. He wants to play in the game. Now I want to try to make this -3x, so I can put a -3 up here because -3 times x gives me -3x, and -3 times -1 gives me a, ooh, where'd it go? I lost it. It gives me, excuse me, a positive 3. So now if I subtract straight down, I add the opposite. I get a remainder here of -11. Okay, and remember, you always put your remainder in your answer. You can go minus 11 over what you divided by, and we divided by that x minus 1. So that right there is my answer. All right, so perfect. That was a long division one. We got through that one. That's a good one. Now the synthetic is a little bit easier. Remember, we have this big long L here. And I put 3 on the outside. Okay. Remember, you go the opposite, so you go x equals 3. That's the 0 of that guy. So you put 3 on the outside. Now I go 1 for my x to the 5th. But notice here I don't have an x to the 4th, so I have to make sure I fill in a 0 for that guy. I do have an x cubed. I'm going to fill in 2 for that one. I don't have an x squared. I'm going to fill in a 0 for that one because there's no x squared term, 0x squared. Then I have -5 for my x, and then 1. So if I go through this process here, remember how the 1 comes straight down, multiply here, add straight down, you get 3, multiply, you get 9, add straight down, you get 11, multiply, you get 33, add straight down, you get 33, multiply here, you're going to get 99. Add straight down again, you're going to get 94, so you're going to get some big numbers here, and that's okay. 3 times 94 is 282. Add straight down, you get 283. So that's great. You did the synthetic substitution part, but now you have to remember that, hey, what's my actual answer? So remember here, this is going to be my remainder. This is my constant, my x squared, my x cubed, and then my x to the 4th. So my answer is 1x to the 4th plus 3x cubed plus 11x squared plus 33x plus 94, and then that remainder, remember, goes over what you divide by, so it's 283 divided by x minus 3, and then that is your answer. So that's got a lot of stuff going on there, some longer problem. That's all right. Now number 3 is actually where we start to find these solutions, find the zeros. So this one, number 3, tells me that -2 is a 0. So that's nice. Hey, that tells me that -2 is a 0. So now I go through and I use that synthetic division with the -2. So I put that -2 out front, then I go 2, 3, -3, and -2. Bring this 2 straight down, multiply to give me -4. Add straight down to give me -1, multiply to give me 2, add straight down to give me -1 again, multiply to give me +2, add straight down to get 0. And remember, if this is a 0, you should get a remainder of 0. All right, now this is my constant, this is my x, this is my x squared. So I have 2x squareds minus 1x minus 1, and now I have to look to factor that guy. And I'm going to kind of put this x plus 2 out in front so I just know that that's coming along for the ride too. Because if -2 is my 0, then I remember that x plus 2 is my factor then. Okay, so now if I factor this guy, I got to make sure I multiply here. So in the top of the diamond goes -2 and -1. So two things that multiply to -2 and add to -1 would be -2 and +1. So if I bring this guy over here, this is going to be x minus 2 and x plus 1, and I gotta make sure that I come back and divide by that original a value. So I divide by 2, I divide by 2, so now I get x minus 1, and then remember 1/2 can't simplify, so that goes in the front, 2x plus 1, and then I still have that x plus 2 on there as well from my original over here. And now if I set these guys all equal to 0 to get all of my solutions, I get x equals 1. I get x equals -1/2 for this one because you subtract the 1 over, then you divide by 2. And then this guy, if I set x plus 2 equals 0, I should get -2. And you should get -2 because that was the one that they gave you, right? So those are your 3 solutions. All right, so that's good if they gave you one of them there. All right, number 4, we're going on, and this one just asked me to find my potential rational solutions. So remember here I have plus or minus my factors of my constant, and my constant here is 14, over the factors of my leading coefficient, which in this case is 2. So now if I go my factors of 14, I have plus or minus, the factors of 14 are 1, 2, 7, 14, and then my factors of 2 are just 1 and 2. So now for your final answer here, you should end up with plus or minus, and then everything on the top needs to talk with everything on the bottom. So 1 divided by 1 is 1, 2 divided by 1 is 2, 7 divided by 1 is 7, and then those are the easy ones. But now these guys need to talk with the 2. So 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, which I already have. 7 divided by 2, I don't have that. That's 7/2. And then 14 divided by 2 is 7, and I already got that guy. So these right here are all of my potential solutions. All right, so number 5, going on with number 5 here. You can look here to see if these guys work. Remember here, this one doesn't give me any. I have to find all of them. And remember, we always like to try 1 and -1 to see which one works. Most of the time, those work. But if those don't work, then we have to go back up here to find these potential. Okay, let's try 1 and see if that works. I get 1, 9, 15, and 7. So I bring that 1 straight down, I get 1, then I go 10. 1 times 10 is 10, I get 25, so we're starting to get in some bigger numbers here, so this is making me think, hey, this might not work. 7 plus 25 is not 0, so no, this doesn't work. All right, let's try -1, see if -1 works. Ooh, that's kind of a big L, but we got 1, 9, 15, and 7. I bring down that 1, then I go -1, 8. -8, this becomes 7, this is -7. So look, I got +7, -7 gives me a 0. Okay, so now if -1 is one of my answers, I know that in my answers I'm going to have x equals -1. All right, somewhere in there. So if -1 is one of my answers, that means x plus 1 is one of my factors. And then I have this, I have my constant, my x, and my x squared. So now I have 1x squared plus 8x plus 7. And now I have to factor this guy. So if I factor this guy, put 7 on the top, 8 on the bottom, two things that multiply to 7 and add to 8 are 7 and 1. All right, so now this guy, that x plus 1 stays out in front, and then I get x plus 7 and x plus 1. So if I set these guys equal to 0, that's where I get the negative 1. Then I get x equals negative 7 for this one, and then I get x equals negative 1 for that guy. All right, so notice here that negative 1 happens twice, and that's okay. All right, not a big deal there. That works. That still gives you your 3 solutions. All right. So now number 6 and number 7, if I flip to the back, these are pretty quick and easy here. So it asks me if these numbers are zeros. All right. So I have to try here. I have to try 2 and see if it gives me a 0 at the end. So now I just go through. I go 1, 2, negative 6, negative 5, and 2. No zeros in for this one. So I got to see if I get a 0 here at the end. If I get a 0 at the end, then yes, it is. But we have to see if it do. All right, bring down this 1. So I get 2, 4. Multiply here, I get 8. I'm going to have 2. Then I'm going to have 4. Then I'm going to have negative 1 and negative 2. Look at that. 2 plus negative 2 does give me 0. So yes, this guy is a solution. All right. Number 7, really the same deal. You put 3 out front, and you go 1, negative 2, negative 2, negative 2. All right, a lot of negative 2's there. Bring down the 1, so I get 3. Add straight down, I get 1. Multiply, I get 3. I get 1. I get multiply, I get 3. I get 1 again. Do I get 0 at the end? No. So this 3 is not a solution. All right, awesome. So moving on to these zeros, 8 and 9. These ones are where we actually multiply these guys together. So remember here, if my zeros are negative 1, 3, and 1, that's when they switch in those parentheses. So it's going to be x plus 1, it's going to be x minus 3, and it's going to be x minus 1. Okay, so now here you just need to FOIL these guys together, and I'm going to multiply these two first together. So I'm going to FOIL that onto that, bring the 1s over. So now x times x is going to be x squared. X times 3, negative 3 is going to be negative 3x. 1 times x is going to be 1x. And 1 times negative 3 is going to be negative 3. So now I still have this x minus 1 on the right side, so don't forget about that guy. And I can combine some like terms here. So I have x squared plus a negative 2x minus 3, and then times that x minus 1. All right, so now I have to multiply these guys together, but there's 3 things in this one. So the x needs to talk to all 3 of those, and the negative 1 needs to talk to all 3 of those as well. All right, so we have here x times x squared is going to be x cubed. X times negative 2x is going to be negative 2x squared. X times negative 3 is going to be negative 3x. Now that negative 1 times x squared is going to be negative 1x squared. Then I have positive 2x, and I have positive 3. So just my final step here, I go through and combine some like terms. My x squareds can combine, and then my x's can combine. So I get x cubed, and then this is going to be minus 3x squared. Then this is going to be minus 1x plus 3. Awesome. So now as I go on to the next one, it's really the same deal. And this one has a 0 as a 0, so I have x minus 0. I go x minus 1, and then I go x minus 3i, and x plus 3i. All right, so I have to go through and multiply these guys together. What we talked about in class is that it's easiest to multiply the i's together first. They're going to cancel out nicely. So x times x times 3i, the negative 3i times these guys. See what we got. So I'm going to keep this guy out in front, x minus 0, and that's just going to be x. Anything minus 0 is just itself. Then this guy still has the x minus 1. I just put a plus negative. And here we have x squared plus 3ix minus 3ix, and minus 9i squared here for that last one. Okay, and remember, what do we always plug in for I squared? We plug in negative 1. So now I have x minus 1, and then I have x squared. Notice that these ix's cancel out. That's why we do those first. And then negative 9 times negative 1 is positive 9. And then now I have to FOIL these guys together. So I bring my x onto the x squared, the negative 1 on these guys. So I have x cubed. X times 9 is going to be plus 9x. Negative 1 times x squared is going to be negative 1x squared, and negative 1 times 9 is going to be negative 9. Okay, so now this last step is just to distribute that x into all these guys. So I have x to the 4th plus 9x squared minus 1x cubed minus 9. All right, so that is multiplying these guys out. All right, so now the last one I have to find all these zeros is number 10. Then we jump into 11 and graphing. To find all the zeros, remember we like to try 1 first. So let's try 1 first, see if we get a 0 here. So I have, and then I want you to be careful here. Number 10 is that we have an x to the 4th. So how many answers should I get? 4 answers in the end. And it says here, look for a GCF first. So if I take an x out of all these terms, I can just go through the same process. So really here I'm just going to take an x out, so it's going to be x, it's going to be 3x cubed minus 13x squared plus 13x and then minus 3 because I took an x out of every single one of those. And really all that's going to happen is that x is just going to kind of hang out in front the whole problem, which is good. So here, I go 3, I have negative 13, I go 13, and I go negative 3. I still need a 0 here at the end. Let's see if we get it. So I go 3, multiply here to get 3, 10, multiply there to get 10. Excuse me, that's a negative 3 and a negative 10, so I should get a negative 10 here. Add straight down and give me 3, multiply 3, add straight down and give me 0 there. So yes, this works. So now what we have, and I want you to make sure you know this, is that x stays out in front from here. Then I know that 1 is a 0, so I know that x minus 1 is a factor. But now I know that 3x squared minus 10x plus 3 also goes into that factor. Now I need to factor this guy, so I need to factor here. Let's go up here and factor this. So in the diamond there, it's going to be 3 times 3 here, which is going to be 9. Put negative 10 on the bottom, so that is negative 9 and negative 1. So this turns into x minus 9 and x minus 1. Don't forget to come back, divide by that 3. So now I have x minus 3, and then I have 3x minus 1. So here, that's what I have here. This guy turns into, so I'm going to have x, I'm going to have x minus 1, and I'm going to have x minus 3, and then 3x minus 1. So now here, if I set these guys all equal to 0, if I set x equal to 0, it's just as simple as x being equal to 0. All right, if I set x minus 1 equal to 0, I get x equals 1. All right, so that's 2 of them so far. Now here's another one, x equals 3, the opposite of that guy. And then here, this one's a little bit tougher, so you have to add the 1 over, then divide by the 3 here. So you get x equals positive 1/3 for this guy. All right, so look, I get 1, 2, 3, 4 answers. I started out with an x to the 4th. That x equals 0 is going to be in there. All right, the last one, number 11, is graphing. This one, you got to make sure you start out with those x-intercepts. So x equals 2 for this first one. Remember, it switches. And then x equals negative 2 for this one. All right, so those are my x-intercepts. I have an x-intercept at negative 2 and then positive 2. So let's see what this guy does. So remember here that I like to plug in x values that are between and beyond. So here, one that's beyond to the left is going to be negative 3. One that's in the middle of these two, it doesn't have to be directly in the middle, but one that's in the middle is 0, x equals 0. And then one that's beyond to the right is x equals 3. So now if I plug these guys in, let's see what I get. If I get f of negative 3, I get negative 3 minus 2, and then I get negative 3 plus 2, and square that. Okay, so now if I look here, negative 3 minus 2 is negative 5. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1, but I still have to square that guy. So negative 1 squared is positive 1, so I get negative 5 times 1, which is obviously just negative 5. Okay, so that one is negative 3, negative 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know that my graph starts from coming in below here and it goes up to that point. Now I have to find out what it does in between these. So if I plug in 0, if I plug in f of 0, I know that you guys can do this on your own. If you do plug in 0, you should get out negative 8. So you can plug that guy in and get out negative 8. So 0, negative 8 is down here. So this guy catches up there, come back down here. Then it's going to go up here. And my last one, f of 3, if you plug in 3 for all those x's, you should get out positive 25. Okay, so you should get out positive 25. 3, positive 25 is way up here. It's way off the graph somewhere. So this guy just keeps on going up, 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 and towards that way. So this is a snake that starts down low and ends up high. Awesome. So thank you for listening to Mr. Laxton's video on this Chapter 6 practice test. Please come find me if you have any questions.